Hello everyone, it is Mica again, and today we're going to begin exploring the Void Ark, a 24-man raid that was introduced with the Heavensward expansion of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, much like the Crystal Tower, even with level sync, we're powerful enough to skip many mechanics or just handle them differently than we did when this raid was new. So I'm here to give you an overview of what to expect when entering the Void Ark for the first time now. But before I begin, I want to assure you that these raids are not incredibly tough or involved anymore. Some of you expressed hesitancy to run these large raids in the comments of my Crystal Tower videos, but they're not meant to be incredibly difficult content, even when they're new. That being said, if you do have a hard time the first few times through, don't worry about it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. No one should expect absolute perfection the first time you encounter a piece of content, especially you. Believe me, it may take a few tries, but you're gonna get the hang of it. Don't worry. I also want to give a shout out to one of my friends who got this footage for me. He's still working on the resistance weapons, and when he heard I was going to do these, he was like, hey, I'll just get the footage for you. And I was like, okay, cool. So thanks, Sam. But with that, let's get right on into it. When you first enter the Void Ark, there's going to be 3 groups of trash mobs between you and the first boss. These are just that, trash. So take them out as you go. There's nothing special here. The first boss you're going to come upon is Cetus, a large manta ray with an electric personality. The fight should go relatively quickly, but it seems to be the busiest fight of this raid, or at least it feels that way to me. Now, if you're tanking, it's best just to hold him in the center after the initial pull, but you do want to turn him away from the party since he has an untelegraphed, instacast, frontal AoE called Hydro Cannon that will do a fair chunk of damage to us non-tanky types. So not making the entire alliance take this to the face is a courtesy to your healers. He also has a backward AoE that you should see soon after he's pulled called Electric Swipe. This one, however, has both a telegraph and a casting time, giving you ample time to simply step out of the way. He will continue to use both of these AoEs randomly throughout the fight, so if you want to make avoiding them really easy, stay on his flank unless you have positionals that require you to be behind him, or of course are the main tank. Cetus will follow the first electric swipe with a body slam, which will place a large circular indicator on the ground around a random player and begin a cast timer. When the timer's up, Cetus is gonna leap over the alliance and slam down on the ground, doing damage to anyone beneath him. You're going to see this move a few times during the course of the fight, and after he does it, if you're tanking, you can simply tank him where he lands. There's absolutely no need to reposition him. Just simply point him away from the alliance, of course. After this first body slam, Cetus is going to mark random members of the alliance with these large glowing blue balls and begin to cast immersion. If you're marked or you're standing near someone who's marked, all you need to do to avoid this is simply step to the side. The ball is not going to follow. When Cetus finishes casting immersion, the ball will fall to the floor, creating a small puddle of water. If you're hit by this, or if you step into one of these puddles, you'll get a debuff called Dropsy that will do damage over time. He will possibly follow this up with another electric slide and hydro cannon, but then after that, he will cast Symbiosis and go airborne. While he's in the air, 3 small sharks will spawn called Hybotises. There's no tricks here, you can simply DPS them down. While you're fighting, however, one member of the alliance will be marked with this large green overhead marker. This indicates that Cetus is going to start floating toward that marked person and follow them wherever they run, dropping small water orbs that will do AoE damage and knock back anybody they hit. If you have this marker, you simply can move away from the rest of the alliance and train Cetus around the outside of the arena. At this point though, this mechanic is more annoying than dangerous, and depending on DPS, Cetus should maybe only drop 1 to 3 orbs max. I've even seen this mechanic completely skipped, but it's not often. After the ads are down, Cetus will turn to another player and begin casting Body Slam again. But this time, he's going to immediately follow it with an Electric Whirl, a large AoE that has a safe spot directly underneath Cetus, which will do damage to anyone it hits. This is very easy to dodge. You simply have to run toward, but not into, the Body Slam indicator. So after he finishes that, you can simply step into the safe zone. Cetus will follow this with a few random attacks before going airborne again, and this time knocking back 2 of the 3 parties that make up the alliance to the outer portion of the arena, and drawing 1 party into the center before putting up a massive water barrier around the center of the arena and summoning 4 hydrospheres outside of the barrier and 1 hydrocore inside of the barrier. Whatever parties were knocked to the outer perimeter simply need to take out the spheres, while the party that was pushed to the center takes out the core. After these are destroyed, the barrier will drop and Cetus will do yet another Body Slam, but he will immediately follow this one up with an AoE directly around him called Expulsion, before continuing on with the fight. At this point, it's just rinse and repeat, so burn him down and you can continue on. Before you get to the next boss, you're going to come upon a room filled with 3 sets of Dorito moths and worms. The way this is handled seems to vary between parties at this point, but the most common way is for 1 or 2 tanks to run around the room gathering up all the moths and worms so the Alliance can simply AoE them down. While this is happening, pagan knots will also appear at the base of these large angry plant things. If left alone, they're going to grow and eventually explode, filling the room with taint. If too much taint accumulates, it's going to wipe the raid, so take these out whenever they appear. They go down really quick. And I've honestly never actually seen the raid wipe from this mechanic, so it's very easy to deal with. After each set of moth and worms are defeated, a Marlboro will spawn. The only thing you need to worry about with them is their breath attack, just like any other Marlboro. After all 3 Marlboro are down, the door will open and you can move on to the next boss. Or set of bosses, I should say, since the next encounter has 2. The Sawtooth, a big plant-infested animal type thing, and Arminsel, a large vine growing out of the center of the arena. 1 tank will want to grab Arminsel, and 1 will want to grab Sawtooth. If you are the tank who grabs Sawtooth, you want to pull him to the outer portion of the arena and face him outward, away from the Alliance. Both Sawtooth and Arminsel have a few AoEs that are very easy to dodge, and will gain immunity to either ranged or magical attacks soon after the fight begins, indicated by this buff marker on the boss bar. The bow means they are immune to ranged attacks, and the staff means they are immune to magic attacks. If you see this buff and your damage is reduced to 0, simply switch to the other boss. The main mechanics of this fight include the Devour mechanic, the Mucus mechanic, and the Shockwave Stomp mechanic. During the Devour mechanic, Sawtooth will bury his heads into the ground and 3 large circles of shifting soil will appear, followed by his heads bursting forth from the middle of these circles. Anyone caught in these circles when his heads appear will be devoured and spit back out seconds later with a debuff indicated by these leaves coming from their head. This debuff will make you lose control of your character and attack other party members until it wears off. The bosses also get a power up from each person eaten, and if they gain too many, it's going to cause a wipe. Again, however, after all these years, I've only ever seen this happen once or maybe twice at the most. This is sometimes preceded by fly ads, which will also be devoured if not defeated and contribute to the wipe mechanic. These flies go down in just a hit or 2 though, and taking them out is quick and easy, especially for ranged jobs. So not standing in the yuck and taking out the ads is all you really need to do to handle this mechanic. The Mucus mechanic has 2 variations. One marks a handful of players with these balls of mucus above their heads and a large circle around them. If you are marked like this, you're going to want to run away from other players who should also be running away from you. Anyone caught within the circle will be tethered to anyone else who are also in the circle, rendering them unable to move or attack until the tether is broken. And the only way to break the tether is for someone who's not tethered to run through it. If no one is in the circle besides the person who was marked, then no one gets tethered. The other variation of this Mucus mechanic is an AoE directly around Sawtooth. At various points, a Sawtooth will cast Mucus Spray. Now, this has no visible telegraph around him, but it does have a fairly large range, and anybody it hits will be tethered to the other players just like they were in the previous example. It has a fairly quick cast that's honestly easy to miss, but if you do see it, simply run away from Sawtooth until he finishes casting. Note, if you're the tank, you can stay where you are, so you don't need to reposition Sawtooth. It's up to the other players to dodge this attack, not you. If they do, you're going to be completely unaffected. These two mechanics, both the Devour and the Mucus mechanics, are going to be used randomly throughout the battle, so just kind of watch for them. The final mechanic is Shockwave Stomp, and will be triggered when Sawtooth hits around 50% health. During this mechanic, Mica will raise a vine shield around itself and become immune to damage while Sawtooth casts the actual ability. Now you need to place Mica between you and Sawtooth to avoid this attack. Just use Mica as a wall or a shield. If you do not, you will die from this attack. But it does have a fairly long cast time, and it's really hard to miss because of this big vine shield. So it's really easy to dodge. However, tanks, you cannot eat this attack with cooldowns. You need to place Mica between yourself and Sawtooth, just like everybody else. After the attack is finished, you can grab him and reposition him. Outside of this, all you really need to do is DPS the bosses down and move on. After another quick round of ads, you will come to this big tentacled thing called Kukulen, or whatever. I'm really not sure how to pronounce it, but when it was new, we simply called it Snooky, so there's that. Anyway, when this thing is pulled, the tank will want to keep it in the center and just face it away from the party. Like the other boss, there's three main mechanics to this fight: the Bile mechanic, the Tentacle mechanic, and the Pact mechanic. The Bile mechanic only has 3 variations that you're going to see anymore. Soon after the fight begins, Kukulen is going to turn to a random player and cast Corrosive Bile, which is a frontal cone AoE that will do damage over time in very large chunks, with no telegraph to indicate where it will hit. To avoid this, it's best just to move to his flank or behind him. Anywhere, really, as long as you're not directly in front of him. The second variation of this happens when Kukulen spits a ball of mucus into the air that will create a pool of toxic mucus on the ground that will do damage over time to anybody standing in it. Where it lands will be indicated by this large circle. Simply don't stand in the yuck and you'll be good. The final version will come directly after the Pact mechanic and is called Pestilence, which will do minor unavoidable raid-wide damage. The Tentacle mechanic is an easy one to deal with. When you see his tentacles raised into the air, he's readying an attack called Flailing Tentacles, where he will just slam them down in straight lines, doing medium damage. Simply stand in between his tentacles to avoid this. The final mechanic is the Pact mechanic, which will begin when Kukulen casts Void Pact and moves to the center of the arena. On the raised platforms around the arena, you're going to see void gates appear, and from each of these void gates, a single slime mob called a Fubar will appear. DPS these ads down as quick as you can. At a certain point, Kukulen will turn to one of these ads and try to inhale it, which will give him a damage buff that will last the rest of the fight. If you see this large conal indicator, just move the Fubar out to avoid this. This will be repeated a second time with a second round of Fubars, and after the last Fubar goes down, he will do the aforementioned Pestilence attack, and then it's just a matter of DPSing him down, which at this point won't really take that long. Side note, you may see the beginnings of other mechanics that used to be a thing. For instance, at one point before the Pact mechanic, you may see gyro towers appear, and after Pestilence, you may see these fireball-looking spheres appear. These are both dead mechanics, so you no longer need to attack the towers or worry about the spheres. Just ignore them and focus on the boss. Now you have come to the final boss of the Void Ark, Echidna. Outside of a few easily dodgeable AoEs, there's only a few things to watch out for when it comes to this battle. And tanks, of course, will want to hold her in the center of the arena and face her away from the party. The first attack that you may want to watch out for is Abyssal Reaper, which she will use randomly throughout this entire encounter. Now, this does not do a whole lot of damage by any means, but it does come with a small knockback, which can interrupt your rotation. So if you do not need to be in melee range, don't be, and you're golden. If you are a melee, you can dodge this very easily. It has no indicator, but it has a very minimal range, so just take a few steps away from her and you should be good. The second are her jump attacks. When she goes airborne, one of two things will happen. Either one person will be marked with the normal stack icon, so everybody can just group together to split the damage, or she will place these large circular indicators on the ground that you need to run out of. And that's all there is to her jumps. At around 65% health, she's also going to break into 3 separate mobs, a Lamea and 2 snakes. Each one of these will auto-target a tank, so as soon as they become targetable, you quickly tab target through them to see which one's name is in blue on the boss bar, and that is the one you should focus on. Now, if you're a tank here, or you just have hate because your tank is dead, you're going to want to separate these mobs, especially the snakes. If they're too close together, they're going to get a really big defense buff that's going to make them a pain in the backside to kill. So simply run them apart until this buff stack reaches 0 or disappears completely. Never ever just hold them in the center like this guy did. It makes this mechanic so much more difficult than it needs to be and makes it last so much longer than it needs to. If all is done correctly, all 3 of these ads should go down in a matter of seconds. And after the last one is dead, the boss will reform and do a small amount of unavoidable raid-wide damage. If your overall raid damage is low, she may do this a second time when she's getting close to dying, but it's very uncommon in my experience for this to happen these days. After she reforms, she will also summon 2 blood guards to aid her. These again die really quick, so a tank can just grab them and the alliance can take care of them in just a matter of seconds. The last thing you want to watch out for is petrifaction, indicated by this eye, which, if you've never seen this indicator before, means you want to face away from the boss. After she casts petrifaction, anybody who's facing her will be petrified and unable to move or attack until it wears off. And with that, my friends, you have completed the first raid of the Void Ark series. Congratulations! The Weeping City of Mhach is next, and I'm going to get to work on that right away for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask below, and I will try to clarify anything you are unsure of. And if this video was helpful, I hope you drop me a like and a sub for more. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is linked in the description below. But with that, as per the usual, it has been a hoot. Until next time, have fun.